There are families that celebrate equally, and families that keep a quiet ledger of who deserves what. In the second kind of family, the ledger is never written down. Nobody posts it on the refrigerator. Nobody reads it aloud at Thanksgiving. But everyone who lives inside that family knows it. They know it the way you know where the creek is on the third stair, automatically, without thinking, because they have been walking around it their whole lives. I was 30 when I first understood that I had been living inside a family with a ledger. I was 52 when I finally stopped trying to balance it. My name is Rosalind Fairhaven. I am 52 years old. I have a daughter named Lily who turned 8 this past April, and on the Saturday of her birthday, 14 of my relatives drove past my parents' house on Dunmore Street to get to the community hall I had rented on Ferris Road. My parents were at their own house that afternoon. They had spent $3,400 throwing a party for my younger brother, Derek, and they had expected me to be there too, helping with the setup, carrying trays from the kitchen the way I always did. I was not there. I was at Ferris Road, watching my daughter lean over a cake with 8 candles on it, and I was thinking about 11 years' worth of water bills and car notes, and the particular silence of a woman who has been carrying things so long she has forgotten what it felt like to put them down. I grew up the oldest of 2 children in a mid-sized house in Tucson, Arizona. My father, Roy, worked intermittent construction jobs through most of my childhood. My mother, Patricia, cleaned houses 3 days a week and managed everything else the other 4. They were not cruel people. I want to say that plainly because the story I am about to tell you is not a story about monsters. It is a story about a pattern, and patterns are more insidious than monsters, because monsters you can see. The pattern in our family was this: Derek needed more. He needed more attention, more patience, more money, more excuses. It started when we were children. Derek was 6 years younger than me, and he cried louder and wanted harder and broke things more often. By the time I was 12 and he was 6, I had already learned that the way to be loved in our family was to require as little as possible. I did not ask for new shoes when the soles on my old ones were cracking. I did not ask for help with the application to the hospital's nursing assistant program at 17. I figured it out. I signed the form myself, found the bus route, showed up, passed the assessment. I understood, even then, that my parents were not doing this to me deliberately. My father had been the responsible one in his family too, the one who held things together while his brother stumbled. My mother had grown up in a house where the squeaky wheel got the grease, and she had been a quiet wheel herself, and she had never questioned whether that was fair. They were replicating what they knew. That does not make what happened right. But I need you to understand that I spent a long time giving them the benefit of the doubt because I loved them and because I thought that if I just kept being the responsible one, eventually they would see it. They did not see it. Or maybe they saw it and it just did not change anything, which is its own kind of answer. By the time I was in my mid-30s, I was a ward coordinator at St. Aurelius Children's Hospital in Tucson, working rotating shifts that sometimes started at 10 at night and ended at 7 the next morning. I had a daughter, Lily, with my former partner, who was a good father and remained in Lily's life though he and I had separated when she was 2. I had a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city, a Honda Civic I had paid off in full, and a monthly budget I kept in a small handwritten ledger in my kitchen drawer. I also had a standing transfer that left my checking account on the 15th of every month. $460 straight to my parents' joint account. It started in 2013 when my father threw out his back and could not work for 3 months, and the car note was about to fall behind. I set it up as a temporary measure. 11 years later, it was still running. I had also paid, at various points across those 11 years, a $1,200 dental bill my mother had let go to collections, 2 months of Derek's rent when he lost a job in 2018, $400 toward a car repair my father needed in the winter of 2021, and one very large credit card bill I prefer not to itemize here, which arrived on my kitchen table in an envelope with Derek's name on it and my mother's handwritten note that said simply, "He doesn't know what to do, Rose." I knew what to do. I always knew what to do. That was the whole problem. The conversation that changed things happened on a Sunday in February. I had driven over to my parents' house after my overnight shift, which meant I had been awake for 19 hours by the time I sat down at their kitchen table with a cup of my mother's coffee and a plate of toast I did not really want. My mother was in good spirits. She was talking about Derek's upcoming birthday in April, his 40th, and she had a notebook open on the table with a list of caterers, a short list of venues, and a printed-out quote from a party supply company. I watched her flip pages for a moment. Then I asked how much they were thinking of spending. She looked up. "We want it to be a real celebration," she said. "It's his 40th. That's a milestone." I said I agreed that 40 was a milestone. I said my 40th had been a nice small dinner, just me and Lily and my friend Gwen, at a Thai restaurant on Fifth Avenue. I said Lily had been 3 at the time, and she had eaten noodles and fallen asleep in her chair. My mother smiled at that, the way she smiled at most things I said, warmly but without quite landing. "You were always so low maintenance," she said. "You never needed a fuss." I picked up my coffee cup. I held it with both hands. She kept talking. They had found a venue on Collinwood Road that could hold 60 people. The deposit alone was $800. The catering was being handled by a woman my father knew, and the total quote was $3,412 for the food, the venue, the decorations, and Derek's cake, which was going to be a custom 3-layer carrot cake from a bakery in central Tucson. Lily's birthday was also in April, the 14th, 2 weeks after Derek's. I had not been planning anything large. I never did. The previous year I had made Lily a cake at home, chocolate with rainbow sprinkles, and we had eaten it with Gwen and her kids in my apartment. The year before that, Lily and I had gone to the Children's Museum and then for ice cream. My daughter was the kind of child who did not need a fuss, which was ironic, given that she was being raised by someone who had spent her whole life being told the same thing. I said, as carefully as I could, that Lily's birthday fell 2 weeks after Derek's. I said I had been thinking about doing something a little bigger this year, something she could invite her school friends to, maybe a hall rental. My mother nodded. Then she said, "Your brother needs a proper celebration this year, Rose. It's been hard for him." Derek had, in the preceding year, changed jobs twice, briefly dated a woman his age who had not worked out, and moved to a newer apartment that cost him more than his previous one. These were, by any accounting, ordinary adult difficulties. I said nothing. I drove home. I sat in the parking lot of my apartment building in my Honda Civic for 38 minutes. Not because I was falling apart. I want to be clear about that. I was not falling apart. I was thinking about the $1,200 dental bill, and the 2 months of Derek's rent, and the handwritten note that said, "He doesn't know what to do, Rose." I was thinking about the $460 that left my account on the 15th of every month like clockwork, and how in 11 years nobody had ever once asked how I was doing for money, whether I was managing, whether my own budget had room. I was thinking about my daughter, who was turning 8 in April, and who had told me 3 weeks earlier that she hoped Grandma and Grandpa would come to her birthday this year. She'd asked me that, I thought. She'd asked it like it was a question whose answer she wasn't sure of. That was the thing that did it. Not the $3,400. Not 11 years of standing transfers. My daughter asking whether her grandparents would come to her birthday, and not being sure of the answer, because she had learned already, at 7 years old, that in this family some events mattered and others were filed under low maintenance. I went upstairs. I opened my laptop. I looked up the community hall on Ferris Road. I did not tell my parents what I was planning. I want to be clear about that too. I did not announce anything. I did not issue ultimatums. I did not make speeches at the kitchen table. I called the hall on Ferris Road the next morning, spoke to a man named Gerald who managed the bookings, and reserved the space for the 14th of April from noon to 5. The rental fee was $240 for the afternoon. I paid it on a Tuesday, and Gerald emailed me a confirmation. Then I started working on the guest list. My coworker and closest friend, Gwen Thackeray, was the first person I called. Gwen had been watching the dynamic in my family for years from a careful distance, the way a good friend does, noting things, saying little until you were ready to hear it. She picked up on the second ring. "I'm throwing Lily a proper birthday," I said. "A hall, decorations, food, the whole thing." There was a pause. "At the same time as Derek's?" 2 weeks after. "But I'm inviting the family." Another pause. Then she said, "I'm bringing the cake." I made a list in my handwritten ledger. Not a digital spreadsheet. The actual small brown ledger I kept in my kitchen drawer where I recorded my bills. I flipped to a clean page and wrote names in 2 columns. People I genuinely believed would choose to come, and people I was less sure about. In the first column, my Aunt Viv, who was my mother's older sister and had been watching my parents' favoritism with quiet, dignified disapproval for 30 years. My cousin Rachel and her husband. 3 families from Lily's school. My father's brother, Uncle Pete, who had always had a soft spot for me and a mild, wordless frustration with my father.
Gwen.
Several neighbors who had watched Lily grow up. In the second column, most of my parents' closer friends. My mother's book club women, who were loyal to Patricia first and observant second. I sent the invitations by text on a Thursday evening in early March, 2 weeks after I had booked the hall. The message was simple. Lily's 8th birthday, April 14th, noon to 5, Ferris Road Community Hall, lunch provided. Please RSVP. I included Lily's photo from her school picture day. Within 48 hours, 26 people had confirmed. By the end of the following week, that number was 31. Aunt Viv called me the evening the invitation arrived. She was 64 years old, and she had the particular voice of a woman who has spent a long time watching and waiting and choosing her moments. "I'll be there," she said. "I wouldn't miss it." "Thank you, Aunt Viv." "Your mother know you're doing this?" "I haven't mentioned it." A pause. I heard her take a breath. "Probably wise," she said. Then she added, "That little girl deserves a real birthday. She's always deserved a real birthday." I was standing at my kitchen counter when she said that, one hand resting on the copper kettle I kept on the burner. I did not say anything for a moment. There was something in her voice, not pity, not quite, more like recognition. The kind of recognition that tells you someone has been seeing the same thing you have been living and they have just been waiting for you to see it too. I thanked her again. I set the kettle on the burner and listened to the first faint sound of it beginning to heat. The vulnerability came on a Wednesday night 2.5 weeks before the birthday. It was 11:15 in the evening. Lily was asleep in her room. I had worked an evening shift, come home, checked her homework folder, and was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open to the event planning document I had built for the party. I had a tab open with a catering order, sandwiches, fruit platters, juice boxes, a pasta salad from the deli on Renner Street. Total cost, $417. I had another tab open with the decorations I had ordered online, purple and gold, because those were Lily's colors, had been since she was 4, and declared them with the authority of someone who had given the matter serious thought. $417 for food, $89 for decorations, $240 for the hall. I totaled it in the margin of my notebook, $746. Derek's party, $3,412. I sat there looking at those 2 numbers for a long time. The voice that came up was not dramatic. It was tired. It said, "What are you doing? You are a 52-year-old woman throwing a children's birthday party to prove a point. You are spending $746 and calling it dignity. Your daughter does not need a hall on Ferris Road to feel loved. You are the one who needs this. Admit that." I closed the laptop. I sat in the kitchen with no lights except the one over the stove, and I thought about whether that voice was right. Then I thought about Lily asking me if Grandma and Grandpa would come to her birthday, with that careful uncertainty in her voice, the particular uncertainty of a child who has already learned not to assume. She was 7 years old. She should not have learned that yet. I opened the laptop again. I checked the RSVP count. 31 confirmed. I scrolled through the names. Aunt Viv, Uncle Pete, Rachel and her husband. 3 of Lily's school friends with their parents.
Gwen.
People who had said yes within hours, not because of an obligation, but because someone had invited them and they wanted to come. I thought, that is enough. That is more than enough. I made myself a cup of Earl Grey from the tin with a dent on the lid, and I sat at the table until midnight, reading over the confirmation emails, and I was okay. The morning of April 14th was a Saturday. It was a warm Tucson morning, clear sky, dry air, the particular sharpness of an Arizona spring before the heat sets in. I drove to Ferris Road at 9:30 to begin setting up. Gwen arrived at 10 with a cake, 2 tiers, purple frosting, Gold stars around the edge, Lily's name in her favorite chunky handwriting, a design I had described to Gwen over the phone, and that she had executed with the intensity of someone who understood what this particular cake needed to be. We set up the tables with the purple and gold tablecloths I had ordered. We arranged the fruit platters. We hung a banner I had printed at the copy shop, "Happy 8th Birthday, Lily," in gold on purple. I had also, on a small table near the entrance, placed a framed photograph of Lily at age 2, sitting on the dock at Cedar Lake on a trip we had taken, eating watermelon, laughing at something outside the frame. I had always loved that photograph. I had always meant to do something with it. The first guests arrived at 11:45. By noon, 38 people were in the hall. Aunt Viv came in at 12:05 and looked around at the room and then at me, and she put both hands on my arms and said, "Look at all these people." Uncle Pete came at 12:15 with his wife, Sandra. He shook my hand with both of his and said, "Good for you, Rosalind," and I understood that those 4 words contained an entire paragraph. Lily arrived at 12:30, brought by her father, and she stopped in the doorway and looked at the room, the tablecloths, the banner, the people, Gwen waving from behind a cake table, and her mouth opened and she said, in a voice that was almost a whisper, "Mom, did you do all this?" I said, "Every bit." She ran into the room, and I stood in the doorway and watched her go. The party ran the full 5 hours. People ate and talked, and the children ran between the tables, and Lily opened gifts, and at 4 o'clock Gwen brought out the cake, and everyone sang. Lily leaned over the candles, 8 of them, all lit, all standing, and she took a breath and blew, and every single one went out. Across town, at the house on Dunmore Street, my parents were hosting Derek's party. I did not know until later how many people had come. 14 was the number my Aunt Viv gave me, which she had heard from my mother's friend Carol, who had been there. 14 guests, including the caterer's assistant, who stayed to help clean up. 38 had come to Ferris Road. I did not feel triumphant when I heard that number. I want to say that clearly. What I felt was something quieter and harder to name, something closer to grief, and also, underneath the grief, a small, solid peace. The kind of peace that comes not from winning something, but from finally stopping pretending that a loss is not a loss. My mother called me that evening at 7:43. Lily was asleep in the back seat of the car on the way home, completely finished, the way only children and the truly contented can sleep. I pulled over on Rampart Street to take the call. "I heard you had a party for Lily today," my mother said. "I did," I said. "You didn't tell us." "No," I said. "I didn't." There was a silence. In it, I could hear her deciding what to make of what I had done, turning it over, trying to find the angle at which she could be the one who had been wronged.
"Viv was there," she said.
"Yes." "And Pete." "Yes." "You planned this," she said. "You planned it on the same day as Derek's party." I said, "His party was on the 1st. Lily's birthday is the 14th. They are not the same day, Mom." Another silence. Then, "You know what I mean." I looked at Lily in the rearview mirror. She was asleep with her cheek pressed against the window, still wearing her party crown, a small gold cardboard thing that Gwen had put on her head during the cake song and that she had refused to take off. I said, "I know what you mean. Rose, I don't understand why you couldn't just. I've been paying $460 into your account every month for 11 years, I said. I want you to know that I know that number. I've always known it." She was quiet. "I paid the dental bill," I said. "I paid 2 months of Derek's rent. I paid the car repair in 2021. I have never said anything about any of it, and I have never asked for anything back. We never asked you to do those things." "No," I said. "You didn't." "I did them because I thought that was what family did."
"But I've been thinking about that."
"About what family does." I heard her take a breath. "What I've decided," I said, "is that I will keep having a relationship with you and Dad. I would like that. But Lily's birthday is going to be a real event from now on, every year. And when I tell you about something that matters to me or to her, I need you to actually hear it. Not file it under low maintenance and move on."
"That's not fair," she said.
"We love Lily." "I know you do," I said. Show her. I let her sit with that. She did not respond, and after a moment I said I needed to get Lily home and to bed, and I said good night, and I ended the call. I sat on Rampart Street for a moment with the phone in my hand. The streetlights had come on. Lily breathed softly in the back seat. I pulled back onto the road and drove home. In the weeks that followed, 3 things happened in a sequence that I had not planned but that I also could not claim surprised me. The first was that Aunt Viv called me and said she had talked to my mother. I do not know exactly what was said. Viv told me only that she had told Patricia that it was time to look at things honestly, and that Patricia had cried, and that crying was probably a start. Aunt Viv's voice, when she said this, was the voice of a woman who has been patient for 30 years and is running out of it. The second thing was that my father called me on a Tuesday morning, which he almost never did. He called, and when I answered, he said, "I heard what you said to your mother."
He paused.
"You're right about the money," he said. "I didn't add it up the way I should have."
That was all he said about it.
But Roy Fairhaven, who had never in my memory said "you're right" without a qualification attached, had said it plainly on a Tuesday morning without preamble, and that meant something. The third thing was a text from Derek. It arrived on a Thursday, 2.5 weeks after the birthday. It said, "I know I've taken more than I should have. I'm going to try to do better." It was 11 words. I looked at them for a long time. I thought about how Derek had learned, the same way my father had learned, that the responsible one absorbs and the rest flow. I thought about how he had lived inside that too for 40 years, and how being the one who takes is its own kind of prison. I texted back, "I know. That means a lot." I did not cancel the standing transfer that month. I sat with that decision for a long time. In the end, I reduced it from $460 to $230, exactly half. I changed the memo line on the transfer. Where it had previously been blank, I now wrote, "Contribution voluntary." 2 words. Small ones. But they changed what the money was. I have thought a lot, since that birthday, about what we teach the children who are watching us. Lily is 8 now. She is old enough to have observed things I wish she had not had to observe, and young enough that there is still time to show her a different model. What I want her to see is this: you can love people and still require them to see you. Those 2 things are not in conflict. Requiring to be seen is not an ultimatum. It is the basic condition of a real relationship, and anyone who tells you that asking for it is selfish has a reason to want you to stay quiet. Some kindnesses are loans the lender forgets they're keeping. I had been lending for 11 years without a ledger, or rather, I had a ledger, but I kept it to myself. That is on me. The day I stopped keeping it to myself was not the day I became difficult. It was the day I became honest. A family will tell you blood is thicker than water until the day blood asks them to give something up. I have thought about that a lot. My parents love me. I believe that in the complete, uncomplicated way, I believe most true things. But love without fairness is not an inheritance. It is a slow leak you don't notice until the floor is wet. Family without respect becomes entitlement, and entitlement grows teeth the moment you build something it cannot control. I had been building quietly for years. My career, my apartment, my handwritten ledger, my daughter's birthday, and when those things became visible enough to compare, the comparison did its work without any help from me. Forgiveness is not access. I have said that to myself a dozen times since April. I forgive my parents the 11 years of not quite seeing me. I understand the pattern that produced it, but understanding is not reunion on unchanged terms. It is the beginning of renegotiation, and renegotiation has to go both ways. What I know now, at 52, that I did not know at 30, is that the cost of keeping the peace in a house where peace means being the smallest person in the room is your whole life. I spent a good portion of mine making myself small and calling it strength. I am not doing that anymore. My daughter has a framed photograph on her bedroom wall now, the one from Cedar Lake, at age 2, watermelon, laughing at something outside the frame. I put it there the week after her birthday. She asked me what it was from, and I told her it was from a trip we took, just the 2 of us, when she was small. "Were you happy?" she asked. "I was," I said. "We both were." She nodded, in the serious way she has, and went back to her book. I stood in the doorway for a moment. I thought about the party. About 38 people in a hall on Ferris Road, and 8 candles going out all at once, and a little girl in a gold paper crown asleep against a car window. If you have ever kept the peace by making yourself smaller, paid the bills, run the errands, swallowed the unequal share without a word, I want to ask you something. When you picture what it would feel like to stop, to quietly build your own table, and invite the people who actually show up, what comes up for you? Is it fear? Is it guilt? Or is it something that feels underneath all of that a little like relief? Because if it feels like relief, that is your answer.